I have another great blouse pattern for you today, a simple style with just a little bit of flair. This is the perfect puff sleeve blouse. It has raglan sleeves, elasticated cuffs, and buttons all down the back. But best of all, this pattern is free. It's another great downloadable pattern from Peppermint magazine, the Paddington blouse. I'll left the link to the pattern below so you can download it, print it, and sew it along with me today. I hope you join me. Let's get started. You will need one front piece cut on the fold, 2 back pieces mirrored, and 2 3/4 inch wide strips of interfacing, measuring the length of your center back piece. 2 sleeves mirrored, 1 front facing cut on the fold and 1 cut on the fold of interfacing, 2 back facings mirrored and 2 mirrored of interfacing, your button guide pattern piece specific to your size, 5 3/8 inch buttons, and 2 pieces of 1 1/8 inch wide elastic. Lengths for your size are listed in the pattern instructions. Let's start by doing all of our interfacing. Grab that interfacing strip for your back bodice piece and apply it to the wrong side of the fabric, 3/8 away from the center back edge. And do this for both back pieces. Also apply your interfacings to the wrong side of both of your back facing pieces and to the back of your front facing piece. At this point, if you're making size H and above, your pattern piece will include a dart right here. You're going to want to trace the triangle on your piece with a tracing wheel and tracing paper, and then pin and sew your darts at this point. Sizes H and below do not include a dart on the front bodice. Place your sleeve piece right sides together with your front bodice, and pin the armhole seam. Do this for both armholes. Make sure to match the notch on your sleeve with the notch on your front bodice piece to make sure that you're attaching the correct side. Once both of your front armhole seams are pinned in place, go ahead and sew them both with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then serge both seams. Now that our front armhole seams are sewn, we can sew the remaining back armhole seams to our 2 back pieces. Place your back pieces and their corresponding sleeves right sides together and pin. And once you've pinned both back pieces to their armhole seam, go ahead and sew with 3/8 of an inch and then serge just as we did for the front pieces. Place your back facings right sides together with your front facing and pin your shoulder seams. Sew the shoulder seams with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Now take your facing to the ironing board and press up your facing all around the bottom edges, 3/8 of an inch, all the way around. Now take your back facing piece and match it with the corresponding back piece of your garment and pin along the center back edge, catching the fold that you created when you pressed. We're going to sew this facing to the center back opening only, straight down from the neckline, just as far as the facing, with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Do this for both sides of your center back. Now that I've sewn the facing to both center back edges, making sure to catch the fold on the bottom of my facing on both sides, we're going to clip the corners at both of the back necklines, and also grade these seams. So you can just cut the seam of your facing only by about half. This will reduce some of the bulk when we go to turn this facing later. And do that on both sides. Now go to your iron and press the seam that we just created open, and press the rest of the seam all the way down to the hem to the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch. And do this pressing for both sides of your center back. Now we can pin the facing all along the neckline to the bodice, matching the center fronts. Continue pinning all around the neckline until you reach the center back. And for the back neck, you'll see that the facing is shorter than the back neck area, which will cause the bodice to curl into the inside by 7/8 of an inch. So here you can measure that 7/8, which will start at the fold that we created when we just pressed this seam earlier, all the way to the new fold that's created by that curling. So when you have that 7/8 measured, you can pin through all thicknesses along the neckline at the center back. And do this for both of your center backs. Once you've pinned your neckline all the way around, you're ready to sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once it's sewn, clip your corners to reduce bulk. I've gone ahead and pressed the remainder of my center back fold to the right side of the garment by the same 7/8 of an inch that we rolled the center back earlier at the neckline. So this 7/8 of an inch is in addition to the 3/8 of an inch that we folded back earlier. And now at the very bottom of the garment, you can pin that fold at the bottom corner and sew down this portion that we've just pressed back with the iron horizontally along the bottom of the garment with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And do this for both bottom edges of your center backs. And then trim both corners and grade the seams, just cutting that folded portion by about half. And do that on both sides. Now with right sides together, match your side seams and underarm seams and pin. And then sew that seam with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and serge. Do this for both sleeves. Now that our side seams are sewn, we can hem the bottom of our blouse all the way around. Take it to your ironing board and press up the raw edge of your garment all the way around by 3/8 of an inch. We're going to leave that just as it is for a moment and work on the seam of our neckline. And we're going to understitch the seam that connects the bodice to the facing, meaning that we're going to press this seam toward the facing and stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from our original stitching line all the way around. This will help the neckline not to roll forward over this seam. As you're understitching the facing and your stitching approaches the center backs, your presser foot won't be able to understitch all the way to the very corner, so just understitch the seam to the facing as far as you can. And then you can trim away excess material from that seam beyond that second row of stitching. And then turn your facing to the inside, poking out your corners on both sides, and give your neckline a really good press. Once the neckline facing is nicely pressed to the inside all the way around, also turn these button placket facings to the inside, poking out the hem corners on both sides, and we're going to pin this interfaced section to the inside from top to bottom. And then sew along the inner fold all the way from the top to the bottom. With the raw edge of your neckline facing still pressed under, pin the facing all around the neckline. And then we're going to edge stitch the facing to the neckline all along the folded edge, starting and stopping at each center back from the stitching that we just made when we formed that button placket. And here's what your top stitching will look like all around the neckline from the outside and from the inside of your garment. And now we can finally hem the very bottom of our blouse. With that raw edge that we pressed up earlier, still folded up, roll it once more over itself, pin in place all the way across. And sew close to this inner fold of your hem all the way across the bottom of your blouse. Again, starting and stopping from the stitching we made earlier on our button placket. Now it's time to hem our sleeves and prepare for the elastic casing. We're going to take it to our ironing board and press the raw edges of our sleeve 3/8 of an inch, and then again 1 1/8 of an inch, all the way around both sleeves. With the 3/8 inch fold still folded to the inside, fold the sleeve hem along that 1 1/8 inch portion that we've pressed and pin in place. all the way around the sleeve hem. And then sew all around your sleeve hem close to this inner fold, leaving yourself a gap in your stitching of about 2 inches so that we can insert the elastic. Do this for both sleeves. Don't be frustrated if the stitching is not perfect around that difficult curved edge of the sleeve. All of this material is about to get all bunched up when we insert the elastic, so no mistakes in that stitching are going to be visible. Attach a safety pin to one end of your elastic and insert the elastic through the gap you left in your stitches, and draw the elastic through from one end to the other. Once you've pulled the elastic all the way through and you're back at the beginning, overlap your 2 edges of elastic and sew back and forth multiple times with a zigzag stitch to secure. The instructions say to overlap by about 3/4 of an inch, but because my material is a little bit thicker, I'm choosing only to overlap by about 1/4 of an inch. Then sew closed that gap that you created to insert your elastic, following the same line along that fold just like your original stitching. And the very last step is to sew our buttonholes and our buttons. Using the button guide that we cut from the pattern piece, line it up with one of your back plackets, and I'm just going to use pins to mark the very bottom of each of these button markings, and that will be where I start sewing each of my buttonholes. And now I'm going to take this to my machine and use these markings to sew each of my 5 buttonholes. And now I'm going to place the placket with the buttonholes on top of the other placket and pin in place. I'm also going to use pins to mark the center of each buttonhole on the opposing placket. And then when I unpin the plackets from each other, I'm only left with the pins that show me where I'm going to be sewing each button, right in the middle in between my stitching and the outer edge of the garment. Now sew on each of your buttons. And once you have each button sewn on, give your garment one final press and you are all done. Thank you so much for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out my other videos for more great sewing inspiration for your wardrobe. I'll see you in the next video.